Jenny, when I read research articles on science communication, one of the most frequently discussed and debated topics is about the models in science communication. And as you know, at the recent PCST conference in Salvador, there was also a lot of presentations and so on about models. And I know that this is also something that you have focused on in your current PhD studies. So I'd like you to tell us just a little bit about this whole idea of the old models and how it's evolved and how it's changing to, and what you have come up with in your own research.
Well, the classic models that researchers talk about are firstly the deficit model. And this is the model that was very common in the 1980s, 1990s, and still in practice exists today. Mm-hmm. And this model, the scientist-public relationship, was very much about one-way communication, where the scientist had the knowledge, mm-hmm. where there was that knowledge was presumed to be certain, no risk attached to it, and that knowledge was then imparted to a public who largely did not have any knowledge and did not have knowledge that was useful for science either. So it was very much one-way communication, and that's how that was theorised. The public was seen as empty vessels waiting to be filled with the rich knowledge and expertise of scientists coming from science institutions. So there was very much that divide, very much a one-way process. However, in the late 1990s, which might seem a long time ago to most people, there were a number of issues that happened, particularly in the United Kingdom. For example, mad cow disease, mm-hmm. where the scientists and the science minister at the time said, mm-hmm. or the agricultural minister, said that beef from the UK was perfectly safe to eat. In fact, the daughter of the agricultural minister was seen eating a beef burger, saying, yes, this is perfectly safe for anyone to eat. Well, that backfired mm-hmm. when people got sick and people died, and in fact it wasn't safe to eat. And that opened up a whole new distrust of scientists that wasn't there before. People generally trusted science. They were seen as being some of the most trustworthy people. But that whole incident meant there was less trust. And so there were a call by a number of researchers, a call by the House of Lords, saying we need to have more dialogue with the public. Right. We need to consult with them more. Maybe we even need to listen to them more and find out their concerns. And so this whole sort of way of communication, which became more two-way, was theorised as the dialogue model. However, a number of researchers say, well, perhaps it was a way of actually scientists legitimising their research rather than scientists truly listening to the public mm-hmm. and truly taking on board their concerns.
Because I think for scientists to really listen is a challenge when they were used to the deficit way of communicating.
Yeah, that's true. Although remember that these are theories. In mm-hmm. practice, I actually think that there were a lot of scientists already involved in conversations. Mm-hmm. Particularly, I mean, not all scientists are the same, despite this sort of image we have of scientists. Mm-hmm. And I think there were scientists already engaging in two-way communication. And I think a number of scientists were listening to the public. But in terms of how public policy around science was mm-hmm. formulated, mm-hmm. I think it was still a lot of lip service happening.
Right.
There are always exceptions, but there was a lot of lip service. And in response to that, and in response to growing distrust in scientists and science institutions, people started to talk a bit more about participatory models or deliberative models, which dialogue was meant to lead to, that people could actually have a say in the science that happened, the way it was conducted, and the sort of outcomes and products that it produced. It was meant to be a science that allowed people to make decisions better. It meant to allow policymakers to make decisions better. It was seen as making science more democratic, more available and accessible to people. And to some extent, some science programs, some engagement, some science communication programs have taken that on board. However, again, it tends to be the not only a few that do it, and sometimes it's also done in that lip service way, mm-hmm. although there have been some genuine attempts. Taking that forward, in my research, I've looked at that, and to me, particularly when I looked at the science engagement activities that were happening in Australia, but also the literature about practice that was happening, it seemed to me that the three models can actually coexist, and perhaps even should coexist, because there are times when, say, people are participating in science, for example, in a citizen science project, they're participating in collecting the data and so on. There is a time when they may need to be told in a one-way fashion the best methods for collecting that data. And so there's a little bit of that dissemination or one-way model happening at the same time. At the same time, there may be times when the scientists might want to consult with them and find out what knowledge they have of, say, if it's a citizen science project looking at the number of butterflies, the types of butterflies found in an area. They might be consulting with them. So I think all forms of the model can coexist, and I think it's I think where researchers and practitioners have called to stop using the deficit model, to stop having mere dialogue, it can in fact move beyond that. And so my new model actually sees them as being coexisting and requiring each other. But what I would say to practitioners is that there's a need to move beyond just deficit or simple dialogue activities. Many of those are done to inform, to educate, to entertain, and particularly in the cases that I looked at in Australia, to promote science or science institutions, rather than have that real engagement with the science.
Right. So the model that you are proposing, it combines these three models in a kind of continuum of activities.
Yes.
You choose what works best, what combination, and you place emphasis on different parts of it, maybe during different times in a research project.
That's exactly right. And very much the sort of rosette model I've come up with looks at what are the motivations that you're trying to achieve along that spectrum.
Right.
And none of those motivations are wrong, and all of them have a place, but it's about choosing what's appropriate for the science engagement activity you're doing at the time.
Okay. Well, I wish you success with completing that PhD, and look forward to this model, really emerging as one of the recognized models in science communication, because I think it makes sense and it's the right way to go.
Thank you very much. I hope you're right.